Welcome to the second round of the Medfield TV Meet the Candidate special for School Committee. In the first round, we introduced our candidates to the residents of Medfield, and in this round, we're having the candidates respond to both questions from the public as well as comments from each other. A brief rundown of how each show will go. This episode will run from start to finish unedited. Candidates will get as much time as they need to answer questions and respond to comments. We will open with the questions from our viewers. They were selected based on submissions from Facebook, and we selected the most liked comments as of the deadline on March 8th. It should be noted that any ties were broken by Medfield TV. We will then have candidates respond to comments made during the first round of interviews, 2 from each candidate. You will see not only the clip, but also the candidate's reaction and response unedited. Today, I'd like to welcome in school committee candidate Lauren Liljegren. I butchered that. I apologize.
It happens all the time.
But thank you so much for joining us today. It means a lot for you to come in and sit down. This is a new type of way of showcasing this, meet the candidates. It's kind of simulating a live debate. I know it's uncomfortable, but thank you so much for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here. The bright lights are new for me as well. So we're all just going to try something new today. How's that?
Absolutely. So we're going to start off with our questions from our viewers. So this is from top fan Lauren. She says, if elected to the committee, how will you work towards making our schools more inclusive for all students?
That's a great question. So I've typically had inclusion mean something pretty specific. So I'm gonna speak to it today as any population of students who have the potential to be marginalized in a school community. So a few things come to mind. Where we have students with disabilities, state and federal law mandate that we keep folks in the least restrictive environment possible, educating them in the general education curriculum, absolutely wherever possible. And through the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that due to health and safety. Many of our students that are on IEPs, students with disabilities, have been educated separately. So I think making sure, first things first, let's get our disabled students back into the classroom with their general education peers and get back to an environment of inclusion for disabled children. What I would also advocate for is a more robust anti-bullying policy, as well as making sure that assault and bullying are taken completely seriously. And then I would also advocate for the METCO program. I think METCO allows for Medfield students to have an opportunity to engage with somebody with a different background, and then also gives somebody with a different background who wants to be here, who's choosing to be here, the opportunity to be with us. So those are the things that come to mind for me.
All right. Our second question is from Jackie. She says, do you think teacher unions influence school committee elections? And if so, what is the impact to schools?
So a Google search would indicate that they do impact the results. And, after giving it some thought, it makes sense. When we have a spring election, voter turnout is traditionally pretty low. And so it makes sense that those who do get out to vote have a vested interest in the outcome of the election. Public sector unions are organized, they get folks out and they vote. And as a result, they can have an outsized impact on the results of the election, which is why I think it's so important that somebody without ties to education, I don't have an education background, I don't have a relationship with an MTA member, I'm not a current or former MTA member. It just creates some diversity on our school committee so that we have that diversity of perspective, because the existing school committee already has folks that are current, former, or married to current or former MTA members. So yes, so I think the answer is I would say that they do, and that we have a great opportunity now to create some diversity on our school committee in Medfield.
All right, and the third and final question comes from Minta. It was our most popular question that was asked. It says, please discuss how you have been involved in Medfield Public Schools or Medfield Town Government prior to running for school committee, whether you're a parent, a volunteer, on what committees, meetings, etc.
All right. So when I moved to Medfield, my children were 8 and 13, and I was 40 and pregnant. And I have been thrilled to volunteer whenever asked, right? I volunteered in my children's classrooms. I volunteered at Winter Carnival, dropped off cases of water and, provided to the teacher's luncheon. Whenever the Sign Up Genius came out, I signed up. What I haven't done is taken on a leadership position. And, partly that was because I had a newborn, but mostly it was because I didn't ever feel like there was an opportunity to lead where my skills would really lend themselves to the role. The school committee is a policy organization. It's a management organization. It's a budget management organization. And my background in project management and business analysis really lends itself well. So, I'm coming from more of a support volunteer person to moving into, hopefully, right, if elected, a leadership position. And I'm thrilled, right? It's about time.
All right, and now we're going to enter into our second portion of this. This is going to be comments that were made in our first series of Meet the Candidates. We're going to play you some clips and you can respond to them at the finish of the clips.
Yeah, I've been really pleased with two big things that I think are that were important to me when running the last time. One was around class sizes and paying attention to those class sizes. I think that previously, because Medfield is considered a high-performing school district, sometimes attention to some of those details slips, and I think it's an important part of what I call the core values of running a school district. In previous school districts that I've worked in, class size was a very important item. It was not uncommon to have to hire new teachers even 1 week before school started because the class sizes creeped up too large, and we would post and hire additional teacher for that grade level to lower the number of the kids in those classrooms. The other item I was very passionate about was our curriculum. Prior to the pandemic, it was very hard to find any of the curriculum that was being conducted in the classrooms available to parents, or even a guide to understand just about what they're supposed to be tackling in any given school year. Now, I, being a lifelong educator, I have an idea of what the big ideas are across all subject areas at every grade level. Most parents do not, and it's something that the schools should provide, is an organized idea to parents so that they can help support that learning at home. In my two previous school districts I spent most of my career in, also considered high-performing districts, that curriculum being available was extremely important because we want to enable parents to be able to help support what's happening in school.
Go right ahead.
So I agree with Leo on both points. Our current policy, actually, the documented policy of the school committee calls out the classroom limits, right? The teacher to student ratio, and we don't meet them. It's long been understood that we can boost student achievement and student mental health by allowing the small, any reduction in class size is considered great. I absolutely think that we need to get our class sizes smaller, and it should absolutely be, among our top priorities. But right, like anything, it's just money, and we haven't had the space in the budget. Absolutely, it's a top priority, and as a school committee, we should absolutely be following our own policies. And on the second point, I again completely agree. Greater transparency and greater visibility, not just for parents into what the schools are doing, but our entire community should be able to go and see, what are we doing in the schools, right? We want community engagement from everybody, right? This is like our biggest expense, our biggest item in town, and I completely agree with him on both points that we should have visibility, and I think that can only get better.
All right, I think you might agree with the next clip. It's one of your own, and it's on the 2 improvements that you would make if elected.
I have not watched my video. I don't know if I can now. So there's a few things there. One is that at least this past year and perhaps in years prior, we've approved and ratified contracts that I don't believe were in the best interests of the children and families of Medfield. The existing school committee has 7 years of unanimous votes. And I joke all the time, my family of 5 can't decide what shape of pasta to have. So I struggle with how 5 adults from different households who don't speak outside of school committee meetings have so few follow-up questions and always seem to have the same opinion. I don't see the discord that I would expect. I don't see the follow-up questions. I don't see the debate that I would expect to see in a group of 5 people managing a budget of $40 million with all these competing interests. The second piece is we do have 6 open meeting law determinations in Medfield specific to the school committee. And, open meeting laws are complicated and some of these are small infractions. But to be clear, these aren't complaints. These are the actual determinations made by the AG's office. The Board of Health doesn't have any. The selectmen don't have any, and none of our surrounding towns have any. So that seems noteworthy to me. It also comes at a cost of $40,000 to taxpayers, right? Because in all of these cases, the existing school committee has chosen to fight these complaints versus simply admit wrongdoing, right? It's complicated, everybody makes mistakes and move on. So I think that's concerning to me that we're sort of not, I'd like to spend Medfield's money as I'd spend my own. And I don't know that I would spend $40,000 on a lawyer if in the end I knew I had made an ultimately small infraction with really very minor consequences, if any consequences.
Go ahead.
It's hard to listen to your own voice. I think that stands on its own. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, fantastic. So the next one comes from Robert Worth, and it's on the social emotional effects on students after the pandemic.
Once the pandemic is over, I do think that there will still be lasting effects, for the foreseeable future. Like I said, some of those, inequities that existed are now larger. Some of those achievement gaps are now larger. We're really going to have to think about how, the pandemic and the return to school has affected the social emotional health of our students. Beyond the pandemic, beyond that return to school and those effects, those negative effects of the pandemic that will kind of play its way into school for the next couple of years. I do think that those things are still very important. The social emotional health of our students, especially in a high achieving school district like Medfield, is always a top priority for me.
I agree with Robert. I would be a little more specific. While I do absolutely think the social emotional health of our children has been tremendously impacted by the pandemic. I think, I know a lot of children who are in therapy now and maybe weren't before, or probably weren't before, and some who definitely weren't before. What I also know is that the school's number one job of a school committee member is student achievement. And there's no paper, there's no study that doesn't indicate we've seen a learning loss specifically in math. And so while social emotional learning, I think, is critically important, I'd like to hear a bit more about how it is we're going to recoup those learning losses specific to academic subjects, because I think parents have been with these children for a year, and social emotional, while critically important, I don't think it's the number one job of schools.
All right. The next question comes from Leo Brem on how the school committee reacted to the pandemic.
The work done by school committee and by the administration last summer to prepare our schools to be as safe as possible was I don't think I saw any other school districts do as much as we did here to prepare our schools and make them safe environments. And I think that is evident in the number of people who chose to send their students back versus going 100% remote. That's an indicator of just how prepared we were to make our buildings safe, make sure we had protocols in place for cleaning, mask wearing, and so on, consulting with the Board of Health, following the regulations, and any type of new information released from the CDC or the state. All these items together fed into the decision making that we had to make and the negotiating that had to be done with the teachers union.
I agree with Leo. I do agree that Medfield went above and beyond in terms of compliance and keeping everybody safe. Hygiene, mask compliance with students was tremendous, as reported by everybody. Where I don't think that Medfield excelled, certainly toward the beginning of the year, and I would argue ever, is the actual remote learning options that we were delivering to our students. The first 4 months of the year, it was entirely asynchronous. I can say without a doubt, my children were extraordinarily unsuccessful at that model of learning. We had tremendous technology problems. There were weeks that school was canceled as a result of the wireless issues. And given the background that Leo has, I guess that's concerning to me. So 100%, in terms of hygiene, in terms of plexiglass, in terms of the safety protocols that we had in schools, Medfield was outstanding. The learning model that was delivered starting on September 15th, I think many in town would argue was not outstanding. And really, I think that's the number one job of schools.
And you have the next clip is going to be yourself on the return and recover from COVID-19.
I think for me, it's return and recover. We've always had an achievement gap in schools. It feels to me, and we don't have data on this, but I hope to get there, that the achievement gap is ever widening. And so I'd love to see a recovery plan that really calls out, how are we going to manage this? What about children coming in and who didn't need individualized education plans or 504s before, but maybe do now? And the summer slide is long documented. We've had limited in-person instruction for a year now. How can we use the summertime effectively to boost achievement? And one-on-one tutoring has long been understood to be a cost-effective way to immediately boost achievement. Let's look into that. So I'd like to see and be involved in hopefully the execution of, but if not, the development and execution of a recovery plan that really calls out to the community exactly what are we going to do to get everybody back at least to where we were, and hopefully even better. Since I said that, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education have said the same thing, that summertime should be used, right? Individual tutoring should be used, right? It's understood in our leadership organizations within our government that we need to leverage the summertime in order to recoup some of the learning loss. The Massachusetts Teachers Union has also put forth that summer learning and tutoring should be made available to students. So at the time I said that, I didn't know that, but I do now, and I still think we should do it. I was at a school committee meeting last night, and we're not talking about it, and it's all I want to talk about. So that's what I'll say there.
And the final clip before we get you out of the hot chair there is Robert Worth on the experience needed for school committee.
In the past districts that I've been a part of, even though not in an administrative role or not in a school committee member role, I've really been engaged in school committee and kind of keeping track on what's going on. School committees are generally pretty small in Massachusetts districts, between 5 and 7 members. In Medfield, you have 5 members there, and I think what you're really looking for in a successful school committee is a diverse makeup of people from different backgrounds that really represent the community and represent the best interest of students and families. In my current role, I'm able to do that very well and think about how schools run, the budgetary concerns, the day-to-day operations, curriculum, and the way that we implement it. And by being in schools, working with students in classrooms, on the phone with families, engaging in the community every day in a different district, I'm really able to see kind of how that works and sometimes how it doesn't work. And I think I bring that knowledge to the role of a school committee member. I don't think it's a necessary prerequisite to being a successful school committee member, but I surely think it helps. And I think that every school committee really deserves someone who has experience in education, in schools, and really can call themselves an educational expert.
I don't agree with the statement, but I would say we have that, right? There is an existing school committee member who was a teacher in schools. the code of ethics for the Medfield school committee is clear that operations, day-to-day operations of a school district are not the job of the school committee. The job of the school committee is to hire the superintendent, who is the day-to-day operations leader of the district, and then the building managers, the principals of those individual schools. My background in analysis and compliance and project management, I think supremely qualifies me for this role and for this job. I think I'm educated about Medfield's existing policies, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees recommended policies, as well as, reading through the meeting minutes and agendas for the last several years. So I think I'm supremely qualified, and as is well documented, I do not have an education background. So there it is.
Awesome, fantastic. So that's all we have for you today. Is there anything you'd like to add? Is there a final closing statement you'd like to make for the residents of Medfield?
I'd be honored to have your vote, and we'll have to see. Right, March 29th, everybody will come out, and then we'll know what the children and people, the families of Medfield are going to have.
Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. And like we said, March 29th is the election date. You're now educated. You know what you're doing. Go to the ballot and make sure that you cast your vote. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Meet the Candidates.